JOANA always knew how to behave. From an early age, she learned to walk with her head held high, her steps soft, her gaze attentive, as if she were always being watched, which in fact she was. She grew up in the luxurious corridors of Herod Antipas's palace, where everything was glitz and glamour on the outside and tension on the inside. Her father was a respected man among the king's officials, so she never had to worry about the basics of life. She had fine dresses, exotic foods, and servants who catered to her every whim. But what no one saw was the silence that lived inside her. Subscribe to the channel for more exciting Bible stories and turn on notifications so you don't miss any videos. If this content touches your heart and you want to support us, feel free to click on the Thanks a Lot button. All help is welcome and makes a big difference. From a very young age, JOANA understood that there, among marble columns and carefully measured words, there was no room for dreams. She married Cusa, Herod's trusted administrator, a meticulous man, loyal to the throne, always in a hurry and with responsibilities. To everyone, JOANA was a lucky woman, rich, well married, secure. But she felt that the life she led was like a beautiful empty vase, pretty on the outside, hollow on the inside. The parties at the palace, the music, the forced smiles, everything sounded distant to her. There were days when JOANA would look out the window early in the morning and see people rushing by, carrying baskets, talking loudly, laughing genuinely. And there, even with all her wealth, she envied that simplicity she couldn't buy. She felt that something was missing, but she didn't know what. Or maybe she did. She just couldn't put her finger on it. That was when the first rumors began to circulate. They said that in the regions of Galilee, a simple man, a man named Jesus, was healing people. Sick, forgotten, poor people, being touched and restored. The comments were always whispered, as if they were forbidden. But that awakened something in JOANA, a warmth that rose slowly and made her heart beat differently. And then, without warning, the fever came. It started with a chill. One of those that seem silly at first, but soon show that they are not going away. JOANA felt her body grow heavy, her skin burn, her head throb, as if someone were hammering inside it non-stop. The fever came on slowly, but within hours, it had taken over everything. She was sweating cold, barely able to open her eyes. The court doctors came rushing in with their bags full of oils, herbs, and promises. They tried everything, compresses, formal prayers, bitter formulas that tore down her throat, but nothing worked. Cusa sent for the best healers. After all, his wife was well known at court. More than that, she was the mirror image he needed to maintain. But with each visit, the diagnosis was the same. We don't know what's causing it. It's serious. The palace, which had once seemed like a fortress, now looked like a tomb with golden doors. JOANA burned with fever amid the luxury, like a candle slowly melting away. And that was when someone, somewhat timidly, let slip. There is a man, Jesus of Nazareth. They say he heals with a word. Cusa, skeptical and suspicious, made a gesture of disapproval. Charlatan. But JOANA, even in her delirium, heard him. And she grabbed that idea as if it were a rope thrown into the high seas. She asked, she insisted. With cracked lips and a weak voice, she asked to see him. Finally, with no other options, they allowed it. And when he entered, yes, Jesus, he came without pomp or ritual. He just approached her. He looked at her as no one had ever looked at her before. A look that pierced through skin, fever, pride. And then he touched her. In an instant, like the wind that extinguishes a fire, the fever disappeared. The sweat dried up. The weight was gone. JOANA opened her eyes, and for the first time, she saw clearly. She was healed, but something greater than healing was beginning to grow within her. Something that no longer fit into the life she had been living. Because after that day, JOANA no longer wanted to just live. She wanted to follow him. The following days were strange. JOANA walked through the palace as if she were walking in a place she no longer recognized. The walls were still there, The servants too, the same dishes at dinner, the same empty conversations echoing in the corridors. But inside her, everything had changed. It was as if the world had lost its color, or perhaps as if she could finally see how colorless everything there had always been. She tried to follow her routine. She sat at the table with Cusa, listened to reports from the kingdom's administration, put on her gold earrings and embroidered dresses, but nothing fit anymore. It was like wearing someone else's shoes, tight, strange, uncomfortable. The healing Jesus gave her was not only physical, it was in her eyes. Now she could see. She could see how much she had lived surrounded by invisible walls. She could see how her heart had been kept silent, as if she had no right to ask questions. And that's when the restlessness turned into certainty. JOANA no longer wanted to be there. She wanted to go after the man who touched her and calmed her fever with his mere presence. She wanted to understand what he did, what he said, who he was. She felt that there was a deeper truth in his words, something that no philosopher in the palace had ever dared to touch. Cusa didn't understand. How could he? He was part of that system. He tried to convince her that it was just emotion, a passing thing. But JOANA knew. It was like a rope pulling her chest out of that world. And then, one day, she did something unthinkable. She left her comfort, her position, the looks of contempt, and she left. She just left. And when she came close to him again, Jesus didn't ask why a lady of the palace was there, mingling with the common people. He just smiled, as if he already knew she would come. And it was there, among footsteps in the dust and unfamiliar voices, that JOANA found a new place. Among fishermen, widowed mothers, and men who spoke from the heart, she felt for the first time at home. At first, it was strange. JOANA, accustomed to feather pillows and heavy quilts, now slept under the open sky or in simple houses, with straw mattresses and the sound of chickens in the background. There were no perfumed baths or maids at her disposal. Sometimes there was no fresh water, sometimes there was dust on her feet, but she didn't complain, because for the first time, every difficulty made sense. She was in the midst of a group that no one in her former life would have considered important. Ordinary people. Fishermen, women with difficult pasts, men with rough manners and blunt speech. But there, among them, JOANA felt part of something much greater than any of Herod's banquets. They laughed loudly, cried without shame, shared bread and stories, as if they were all blood brothers. And in a way they were. Jesus walked ahead, speaking firmly and tenderly at the same time, and she listened. Every word sank deep. It was as if, finally, someone was explaining life truthfully. JOANA listened and learned. She observed everything, and little by little she did what she knew how to do, organizing, caring, helping as she could. She used her own resources to sustain that journey. She bought food, fetched supplies, offered shelter when possible, not to show off, but because she felt it was the right thing to do. And the most beautiful thing was that no one treated her like an important lady. There was no difference between her and Mary Magdalene, who had once been possessed by demons, or between her and the widow who wept for her son. There, everyone was healed, everyone was called, and JOANA, who had once lived among princes, now walked alongside the Messiah without a crown, and in doing so discovered true nobility. But not everything was joy, because as the crowds grew, the eyes of power began to watch, and a woman like JOANA, connected to the court, walking with this group, was going to cause more noise than she imagined. The comments began quietly. At first, they were just whispers in the corners of the market or muffled murmurs among the palace servants. "Did you see Cusa's wife mixed in with that group? They say she hangs out with fishermen and sinners. What a shame." JOANA's name, once spoken with respect in elite circles, was now laden with scorn and astonishment. It was as if she had betrayed her place in the world. Some wondered aloud if she was sick in the head. Others said it was the influence of that Jesus, that monger of crowds who was turning everything upside down, the first becoming last and the last being exalted. But JOANA did not hide. She walked among the people with the same dignity with which she walked in the king's halls, only now without jewels, without veils, without masks. She knew that her presence attracted attention. It was impossible to go unnoticed. She was a woman with a noble bearing, yes, but with a heart devoted to something much higher than Herod's throne. And that bothered people, because there was a silent irony in the fact that a lady of the court was among the poor, and worse still, she was happy there. It was like an uncomfortable mirror. It showed everyone that perhaps true wealth was not where they had always believed it to be. Even among Jesus' own followers, some found it strange. After all, what did a woman like her want there? But JOANA did not justify herself. She worked, served, listened, and learned. Her testimony was in her calm eyes, her steady manner, and her attention to every detail along the way. She didn't need to explain herself. Her choice spoke loudly, and as the judgmental glances increased, the days became more intense. The tension in the air grew. Opposition to the master grew stronger. And JOANA, unaware, walked closer and closer to the moment when faith would cease to be mere surrender and become resistance. That morning, the sky seemed darker than usual, even though there were no clouds. The air was heavy, as if the world were holding its breath. JOANA walked silently among the crowd, her footsteps sinking into the dust on the road that led to Golgotha. The cries around her were like knives cutting through the air. Some cursed, others cried. And there in front, amid the soldiers and the confusion, was him, carrying the cross. JOANA felt her heart tighten in her chest, but she did not look away. She was there, not because she wanted to see it, but because she could not leave. She had followed him through miracles, words of hope, cold nights and long walks, and now, in the cruelest moment, she remained there, steadfast. Her feet hurt, her soul screamed, but she remained standing. Alongside other women who were crying softly, she saw the master's body being nailed violently. The sound of hammers hitting wood still echoed in her ears, like thunder that no one could silence. Blood ran down his arms, mixed with sweat, dust, and pain. But even in that harsh and unjust scene, there was something inexplicable in the air, something that did not fit with hatred. It was as if, in the midst of torture, there was also love. A love that did not scream, but breathed deeply, enduring everything. JOANA said nothing. She just watched. Her eyes fixed on the cross, her face wet with tears, her mouth dry. She wanted to run there, scream, do something, but all she could do was be there, be a witness, feel in her skin the pain of a world that did not recognize its savior. And that's how she stayed until the end, until the last breath, until the sky truly darkened, until silence fell like a stone. But deep down, something inside her still didn't fade away, because there was a promise she remembered, and a third day that had not yet come. Saturday dragged on. A heavy silence covered everything, like a cloud that didn't rain, only suffocated. JOANA could hardly sleep. Her eyes burned, her body ached, but what weighed most heavily was the emptiness. The image of him on the cross came in flashes, like a nightmare that insisted on returning. Still, when Sunday dawned, she got up very early. She didn't even wait for the light to fill the sky. She gathered the aromas and fabrics. It was tradition, yes, but more than that, it was a final tribute. She went with Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James. The three walked in silence. The path to the tomb was short, but it seemed endless. Each step was a mixture of pain and memory. JOANA remembered the touch that healed her, Jesus' calm smile, the parables told by the sea, and now, a tomb. It was hard to accept that it had all ended there, but when they arrived, something was different. The stone, that huge stone that no one could move alone, was out of place. JOANA's heart raced. She approached slowly, her hands trembling. The tomb was empty. There was no body, there was no sign, only a space filled with silence and mystery. And then, The voice. "Why do you seek among the dead the one who is alive?" Joanna turned around. Two men, looking radiant, looked at them with a smile that seemed to pierce through time. They weren't scared, they were certain. And it was at that moment that Joanna understood. He had said it. He had warned them. And now it was fulfilled. She ran. Her legs barely obeyed her, but she ran, with her heart exploding in her chest, her eyes still in shock, her soul reignited. She had to tell them. She had to warn them. The impossible had happened. Death had not held the Master. But when she reached the disciples and spoke, what she found was not joy. It was doubt, fear, silence. And at that moment, Joanna realized that even though she had seen the miracle with her own eyes, there was still much to face. Joanna returned from the tomb a different person, not only because she had seen angels or because she had run with the most important news in history, but because she now carried something inside her that no one could take away. While many were still confused, trying to understand what had happened, she already knew. She didn't understand everything, of course, but she believed, and that was enough. After the resurrection, the paths became more dangerous. The disciples went into hiding. Threats came from all sides. Speaking the name of Jesus aloud could cost you your freedom or your life. Even so, Joanna did not remain silent. She didn't need to be the center of attention. She never did. She was different. Silent, steadfast, constant, a presence that held the ground when everything seemed to be falling apart. She did walk less, yes. The time for long walks with the Master was over, but the time to bear witness, that had only just begun. Many say that she was one of the women who sustained the nascent church, that she offered shelter to those who fled, that she helped the brothers with her own resources discreetly, without drawing attention. Like a foundation hidden under the house, but which supports everything above. Joanna knew where she stood. She had lived in the shadows of the palace, and now she walked in the shadows of persecution. But she was not afraid. She knew what she had seen. She knew who Jesus was, and no one could take that away from her. At every secret meeting, in every whispered prayer, in every piece of bread carefully shared, she left a part of herself. And they say that her voice remained strong, even in the midst of silence, that her words brought courage, that her gaze was calming, and that, on nights of fear, she was the one who remembered. He lives. I saw him, but time passed. The persecution increased, and the paths of faith began to cross with the empire. Amid the hidden alleys of Jerusalem and the houses that became makeshift churches, Joanna's name was whispered with respect. She did not present herself as one of the first. That was never her way, but everyone knew who she was. Some new converts had no idea that this woman who shared bread with them, who listened patiently to the fears of the youngest, had once walked alongside Jesus himself. She did not tell her story as an ancient tale, but as something alive, present, pulsating. Some say that it was she who told certain details of the miracles to those who wrote the Gospels. That her memories, precise, rich, full of feeling, helped shape words that would echo for centuries. After all, who better than someone who had been there since before the cross and after it to remember the gestures, the expressions, the silences of the Master? Joanna knew both worlds. She knew how Herod's palace worked and understood the hearts of the people. That's why her presence was strategic. While some hid from the soldiers, she knew who to look for, what to say, how to move. She was like a bridge between power and faith. No one noticed her from afar, but as soon as she entered a room, everything suddenly became calmer. Sometimes she would meet old acquaintances from the court, people who remembered her as Cusa's wife, and it was curious. The same people who once laughed at her choice now asked her in secret about this Jesus who had risen from the dead. Joanna looked at them, smiled slightly, and spoke calmly, without exaggeration, without trying to convince them. She just told them what she had seen, and that was enough. But the days became more tense. There were arrests, executions being whispered behind closed doors, and Joanna JOANA remained steadfast. Only now, time was passing differently. Age was approaching. And the question that lingered was, how does the story of a woman who chose to lose everything to follow Christ end? Over time, JOANA's name became less prominent in the records and more prominent in the memories of those who walked with her. The younger ones would ask, "Who is that lady with the steady gaze and quiet voice?" And the older ones would respond with respect, "She saw everything. She walked with him." There were no titles, no accolades. But it was enough to hear a story told by her, with details that only someone who had lived close to her would know, to understand that there was something rare there. No one knows for sure where she spent her last days. Some say she moved to one of the cities where groups of Christians were growing in secret. Others say she stayed nearby in Jerusalem, helping quietly while she could. What is known is that she continued in the same way, discreet, generous, attentive. She never sought prominence, but it was impossible not to notice her presence. She was like a candle lit in a dark room, small but impossible to ignore. The years weighed heavily on her body, but not on her faith. And even when her legs no longer had the strength for long walks, her words carried far. Young people came to her to listen. Leaders asked her for advice. Widows found comfort in her embrace. She, who was once the wife of a man of the palace, ended her life as the mother of the faith of many. Her name appears only twice in the Gospels, almost as if she passed quickly through history. But those who really know her understand that behind every miracle of Jesus, there were people who supported his mission, people like her. JOANA was not only healed, she was transformed. And that transformation took root in many hearts over the years. Now, looking at everything she lived through, the question is not only who was JOANA, but what does her life teach us today? Because there is something in the way she lived her faith that continues to echo, even after time has passed. JOANA's story does not end with applause or statues. It ends as she lived, quietly, but full of strength, a life marked by firm choices, by faith that did not depend on applause, and by a love that did not fade with time. JOANA was not the most famous, nor the most remembered, but perhaps that is why she is so important, because she shows that you don't have to be at the center of the stage to be part of the story that changes the world. She teaches us that faith is not just believing in pretty words. It is setting out on the path, even when you don't know where it leads. It is leaving your comfort zone, abandoning what is safe, and courageously following God's call, even when that call seems strange, even when it goes against everything the world expects of you. JOANA traded the palace for the road. She traded her title for a mission. She was healed in body, but mainly in heart. And when many thought she was losing everything, she was actually gaining something eternal. She served with what she had. She didn't wait for recognition. And because of that, her life echoes to this day. She shows us that God calls ordinary people with real stories, full of doubts, but also full of a desire to obey. That perhaps the most powerful place for a person is not the throne, but the backstage of a faith lived with truth. That sometimes the greatest miracle is not being healed, it is choosing what to do after healing. So when we think our life is too simple or too small, maybe it's time to remember JOANA. Because she proved that a life surrendered into the right hands can change much more than it seems. And the most beautiful thing, she did it all with her feet on the ground and her heart in heaven. If you like JOANA's story and want to continue following other stories of faith and overcoming adversity, be sure to like this video and share it with your loved ones. And of course, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new content. Together, we will explore more powerful lessons from the Bible.